Now things have changed. Israel's attack has effectively killed the Gaza ceasefire talks, stripped US security guarantees of value, and demonstrated that safe havens can no longer be taken for granted.
The problem here is that the whole purpose of aligning with the United States and Israel is security. That is why you align with these people in the first place. So for the Israelis to attack them and defeat the purpose as to why they're selling out in the first place is incredibly counterproductive and puts them in a very weird spot, because now it's like you're selling out for what?
Israel has crossed a new threshold. For the first time, its air force struck inside Qatar, targeting Hamas's political leadership in the heart of Doha. The operation, carried out jointly by the IDF and the Internal Security Agency, Shin Bet, was aimed at senior...
Shin Bet is their FBI equivalent, chat. Mossad is their external security, right? An intelligence apparatus, just like our CIA. And Shin Bet is their FBI.
Negotiators Khalil al-Hayya and Khaled Mashal, who were reportedly reviewing the latest US ceasefire proposal. Both men survived, however.
And Trump gave them 24 hours to review it, which many believe was a ruse to get them in a position where they're together so they can be assassinated. This isn't the first time they've done this.
The strike instead claimed the lives of at least 5 mid-ranking Hamas officials, and with them, possibly the last serious channel for ceasefire negotiations in Gaza. For years, Qatar has been at the center of mediation. It's where deals were struck, hostages released, and ceasefire plans drafted. It's also...
Yeah, Qatar acts as like a middleman between hostile countries and the West, especially Israel and the United States.
Where the United States maintains Al Udeid, the largest airbase in the Middle East, home to thousands of American troops. This balancing act made Qatar indispensable, but now things have changed. Israel's attack has effectively killed the Gaza ceasefire talks, stripped US security guarantees of value, and demonstrated that safe havens can no longer...
Now, this is really important for you guys to understand. So now the peace negotiations are off the table, right? So basically, since the negotiations are off the table, the bombing is continuing, right? Which is to the Israelis' favor. Then it's made it where, does the country feel like it's protected in other Gulf states? No. Right? Israel bombing them has basically removed the security parameter that they thought that they had. Right? So this bombing has done way more than just like target these Hamas guys and, fail. It had other diplomatic negative ramifications.
No longer be taken for granted. The emirate, in the crossfire of playing both sides, has become collateral.
And this is really disturbing because the thing you guys got to understand about the Gulf states, right? With places like, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, their people don't like the Israelis and their people don't like the West, okay? The people, right, the majority Muslim Arab population that live in these countries, they do not like Israel and they don't like the West because of what they've been doing when it comes to supporting the Israelis with occupation of Palestine, right? However, the monarchs understand that if you don't play nice with Israel and the United States, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to run a coup and take you out of power, or you're going to have to be bribed. So they said, you know what? We might as well at least cooperate with these guys and still be able to run our countries rather than say, no, we oppose you guys and then eventually get taken out. And they've seen many dictators have this fate. Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, right? Omar Bashir down in Sudan, civil war there, right? Between Hamedi and the other guy, right? Literally in a civil war between the two, different factions, a paramilitary group in the actual army of Sudan, right? So Lebanon, what's going on with them? Where they killed Hassan Nasrallah, but they still refuse to disarm Hezbollah. So the Gulf states are keenly aware of the fact that if you don't play nice with the West, it could lead to problems. But a lot of the times their people look at them like, you guys sold out. So the problem here is that the whole purpose of aligning with the United States and Israel is security, okay? That is why you align with these people in the first place. So for the Israelis to attack them and defeat the purpose as to why they're selling out in the first place is incredibly counterproductive and puts them in a very weird spot. because now it's like you're selling out for what? So this has put them in a very strange and awkward position diplomatically.
Interestingly, the Hamas meeting itself was initiated by Trump, who urged the group to accept terms for ending the conflict.
Yes, he gave them 24 hours. And this is not the first time that the United States and Israel have used diplomacy, right, feigned diplomacy, to conduct an attack. If you guys remember, and shout out to my guy Cub Cube for joining in. If you guys remember, right, the Israelis and the United States feigned diplomacy with Iran. They had a meeting set up in Qatar on like a weekend, like Saturday. Steve Witkoff was supposed to go meet the Iranians in Qatar. What happened? The Israelis started bombing Iran with Operation Rising Lion. They activated Mossad assets. They took out air defense. They were behind enemy lines. They bombed all their nuclear facilities. They killed several generals, and they also killed several scientists, nuclear scientists, all in one day, right? It was literally probably the worst attack Iran's ever had in their history. It was like a Pearl Harbor event because it all happened in one shot. The Israelis did a fantastic job of attacking the Iranians in one hard blitz, and that's how the Israelis come. Mossad assets activate. The Mossad assets use drones that they assembled in the country. So that means that they had been in Iran for months, staging and preparing for this attack. Once they get activated, they destroyed Iran's many air defense systems, jammed radars. While this was happening, the Israeli Air Force flew into Iran utilizing Syrian and Azerbaijan airspace and shot missiles into Iran. These missiles took out the remaining air defense as well as precision strikes that killed generals in their apartments as they were having dinner and killed scientists. Nuclear scientists. And the Air Force was able to have air dominance for several days because these Mossad assets literally crippled their air defense in country. And they were doing this all in tandem with each other. Right? Really smart and powerful operation. Got to give credit where it's due. It was a big success. But, as you guys know, 18 hours later, boom, boom, boom. And them missiles started raining down. Within 24 hours, they started hitting back Tel Aviv and Haifa, right? And the war lasted for almost 2 weeks. And as the days progressed, it became harder and harder for Israel to defend itself because Israel relies heavily upon its air defense system. The David Sling, Iron Dome, the Arrow, and the THAAD that we gave them. And on top of that, other countries were also assisting with shooting down the missiles. But that's why Trump bombed Fordo, to effectively end the conflict, because the Israelis could not continue the air defense against Iran's enormous ballistic missile program. But that just gives you guys a quick little recap of that.
The timing has fueled allegations that the offer was never meant as a genuine step towards negotiation, but rather as a way to...
But yeah, that's an example of where the U.S. faked diplomacy and used it to sneak attack.
Bait senior Hamas officials into one place and eliminate them on the spot. Hamas has since accused the United States of being an accomplice in the Doha attack. There has been little coverage of this angle though. Of the 97 media outlets that reported on...
Why is it called Operation Rising Lion? Because they were hoping that the Iranian people would rise up and overthrow their government, and it backfired. It failed.
Nearly...
Good question. But that's why they call it Operation Rising Lion.
Half were right-leaning. Such imbalance is dangerous. It risks distorting public perception. To stay on top of things, I use...
Okay.
Qatar now holds the unusual distinction of being bombed by both Iran and Israel within just a few months. For reference, on June 23rd, Iran targeted Al Udeid airbase...
And this was after Trump bombed Fordo. So that's how Iran responded, was by bombing America's military bases there. But they telegraphed it, and the United States was able to shoot down the missiles and everything else like that. It was a symbolic gesture saying, look, we can defend ourselves, but we're not going to escalate.
Base in retaliation for a U.S. strike on its nuclear facilities. However, Tehran had telegraphed the attack in advance. giving Qatar and the United States time to prepare and minimize damage or casualties.
And that's what's called a symbolic strike, guys. So if they hit you, right, but you don't necessarily want to escalate to the point where it's a full-on war, you let them know that you're going to retaliate, you telegraph it, let them prepare their defenses, and it's a way for you to attack them back without escalating and saving face. Military strategy. Iran does this all the time, as many other countries do.
This time, with the Israeli strike, the signals were far less clear. According to the White House, US forces observed Israeli jets heading toward the Gulf, and Washington was only officially informed after the operation was already underway. The Trump administration claims it then relayed a warning to Doha, but Qatari officials insist no such message was received, or at least not in.
And this is where things get confusing because no one really knows who knew what at what time. Everybody's exercising a bit of plausible deniability, as we know that's common in the government.
In time. These conflicting accounts raise more questions than answers. The official story makes little sense. To reach Doha, the Israeli F-35s would have had to cross Jordanian airspace, then Saudi airspace, before finally launching long-range over-the-horizon missiles from a safe distance. That's roughly 1,700 kilometers one way, or 3,400 kilometers for the whole round trip. Even with long-range missiles, the distance would have been too great for the jets to bridge on their own. Moreover, because this was a stealth mission, the F-35s would not have employed external fuel tanks, which would have limited their operational range to about 2,100 kilometers. This estimate doesn't even account for the extra fuel burned in aerial maneuvers or the payload the aircraft would be carrying. All of this means that at some point on the return flight, the Israeli jets must have been refueled mid-air, most likely by tankers operated by US Central Command.
So that creates even more questions.
Incidentally, at the very time of the Israeli strike, a British Voyager tanker took off from Qatar, circled in the skies for several hours.
So this also raised a lot of speculation. So the Brits and America were involved.
And then returned to base. This has led to speculation that Britain had refueled the Israeli jets. The problem, however, is technical. The Voyager tanker relies on a probe and drogue system, in which a cone at the end of a hose connects to the receiving aircraft. The Israeli F-35A, by contrast, requires a flying boom system, which is a rigid arm extending from the tanker. The two systems are not compatible, making it highly unlikely that the British tanker was involved. Meanwhile, according to the Wall Street Journal, the Israeli jets avoided Arab airspace altogether by flying over the Red Sea on the opposite side of the Arabian Peninsula.
Now, let me explain this real quick, guys. Israel using Arab airspace from Saudi Arabia or Jordan allies to attack Qatar is considered a big problem and is looked at as damn near betrayal. So this is why airspace is so important to figure out where it happened. Like, for example, when the Israelis attacked Iran, there's heavy speculation that they used Azerbaijan airspace. The reason why that's a problem is because Azerbaijan is an ally of Iran. So using an ally's airspace to attack them is nuts from a diplomacy perspective. So there's all these delicate diplomatic circumstances you need to account for when you conduct these operations.
From Qatar. From there, they reportedly launched air-launched ballistic missiles that arced into low Earth orbit before striking Doha. However, even in this setting, the Israeli missiles would have been detected by America's space-based infrared sensors. And also, the distance would still have been too great for the jets to complete without support. Case in point, the Israeli operation, whether through Saudi airspace or the Red Sea, must have been picked up by the United States and even approved by it. Even stranger is the silence of Qatar's air defenses. Doha possesses some of the most advanced systems money can buy, including
They buy their weapons from us.
Patriot, THAAD, NASAMS, and Skynex batteries, along with a fleet of F-15Es, Rafales, and Eurofighters. These assets should have detected incoming aircraft and missiles long before they reached the capital, yet none were activated. The absence of any response suggests that the Qatari leadership, like the Trump administration, may have been aware of the operation from the outset and, whether by pressure or circumstance, had little choice but to let it proceed. There is, however, no way to verify any of this. We can only speculate based on the information currently available. Publicly, Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned the Israeli strike as a violation of the country's sovereignty, a position that was echoed by several other Gulf Arab states. Even if the strike missed its intended targets, it delivered a clear message. When Israel perceives a threat to its security, it shows little regard for red lines or diplomatic fallout and places.
And that defeats the purpose and has red-pilled a lot of the Arab world. Okay? Because it's very obvious, guys, now that, and I've told you guys this before, look, I don't want to say I'm glad that they bombed the Qataris, but I've been telling you guys for months that the Israelis are a cowboy rogue state that do whatever they want, whenever they want, and no one can tell them shit. Okay? Bombing an American ally puts us in a precarious situation, puts Qatar in a weird situation, and hurts our relationship with them. But the Israelis don't give a about any of this. And this is the country that we give the most aid to, by the way.
Once considered,
Marco Rubio's over there right now as we speak, chat, trying to figure out how to clean up the mess. Imagine you got a badass little kid, right? Goes to school, starts fights, and instead of you bringing him home and disciplining him, you go meet with him and figure out how you're going to clean up the problems that they created at school. Bruh. That is literally the American-Israeli relationship. They do what they want, spoiled little brat, and we got to clean up their mess, bro.
considered safe havens can no longer be taken for granted.
This is a big deal, chat. Very big deal. And I think this has red-pilled a lot of the Arab world. Even the Gulf states who thought that they were safe, this has red-pilled a lot of them. And this is going to make a lot of them go closer to China, go closer to Russia. Saudi Arabia has already started buying weapons from other world powers, right? Because when they buy weapons from us, we still have some degree of control over their weapons and how they use them. So what's going to happen is these Gulf states are going to diversify their weapon cache from other countries to not be 100% reliant upon the United States, because Israel just demonstrated that if they attack you, you're not going to get the protection that you sold out your country for, by the way.